From the flight deck of the astral plane, this is your captain, Starpilot33, checking in with flight log number 9. As I was thinking about this trip report, I realized the significance of this being the 9th flight log, in that the number 9 often means the end of something, and implicitly, the beginning of something else. This was not only the first trip of the year for me, but also the first trip since I said goodbye to my horse, who left for a new home and a retirement after an unexpected diagnosis last year. My last flight log was the story of asking for help going through with the decision I'd already made, and for the strength to get through the following week of last rides, last feedings and baths, last groomings, and the final walk down the driveway to the trailer that was waiting. Even though she was settled in her new home and happy, I was left with a gaping hole in my life and in my heart. After all, my daily routine for the past 10 years had been taking care of her. But as the native elder entities told me on that last trip, sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do. And they were right. After she left, it was like all the post-trip benefits were erased. That feeling of calmness, peace of mind, and afterglow were gone, and it felt like I fell into a dark hole of depression. I even had an opportunity to trip again in November, but after making preparations, I decided it wasn't the right time, even though I felt terrible. And I needed a boost of encouragement and brain chemicals, even if it was a rough night. I planned to go visit my horse in her new home, which was a 13-hour drive away. I wasn't sure how she would react to me, and I hoped that she would remember me, even though it had only been 3 months. At first, she didn't realize who I was and how I was suddenly there, but once she realized it was me, she was really happy. Her new owners let me bring her saddle and bridle and take her for a walk in the biggest, most beautiful rolling hill pasture either of us had ever been in. She was so excited, she was leaping around in joy and just wanted to gallop, but we had to just walk because of her condition. Finally, after working herself into a sweat just walking around in the cold air, we took her saddle off and let her run free. She rolled on the ground, got up, ran around, and made it clear that she loved her new home and her new pasture friends. So I left there feeling reassured that I'd done the right thing in retiring her there, but the lingering question remained: what now? That was the question I brought to this trip, along with my usual intentions to learn and heal. My biggest question was, what happens now? Ami had said on the last trip that just because some things were ending didn't mean it was the end of everything. Okay, then where am I going now and what am I supposed to do? I aborted the trip mission Saturday night, but that was a good thing I did because the neighbors across the fence decided to throw a loud party with music. They finished up too late for me to start anyway. Yesterday was a strange, stormy day. A cold front blew through with thunderstorms and rain, and I spent most of the day just resting and reading. I felt I'd done no physical preparation for the trip at all. Since the week before was dealing with a sick cat and multiple vet visits, my mental prep was limited to just that day. I hoped the mushrooms wouldn't kick my ass too badly, but when I don't prep very well, there's usually a tough sandblasting that happens early on in the trip to remove whatever crap I came in with. At this point, I was way overdue, into my 4th month since my last trip, so I just got the shrooms I was going to take in November, 3.78 grams of Pinus Envy cubensis, and started soaking them to rehydrate them because I planned to cook a meal with them and forego the nasty ground-up spoonfuls of horrid shroom dust, chased with orange juice like I used to do. One thing I noticed was these mushrooms turned the water so blue it was black. It was so dark it stained the mushrooms themselves and turned them a bluish black also. I suspected I was in for a powerful trip just judging by that. The trip got started early, around 5:45 p.m., and I'd figured we'd be done maybe around 1 or 2 a.m. These shrooms were from an outdoor grown batch from last year. It's definitely true, there is a huge difference between indoor and outdoor grown mushrooms. There isn't much of a difference, however, between fresh and dried, it seems, as long as the dried ones were preserved properly. So I signed off to everyone I was talking to, turned my phone off after finishing my meal. I had everything ready, water, pillows, and a new trip blanket I got for Christmas, so I just waited. Now, normally a very heavy feeling overtakes me within 20 to 30 minutes of finishing the dose. This time I felt a buzzing feeling in my face and head, and a slight body load, but nothing crushing. It was weird. I always wonder at some point whether the shrooms are going to work or not, and then I usually promptly find out they do work. But I closed my eyes and saw mild visuals, and like the last trip on outdoor grown ones, these colors were very subtle. There was a lot of tan, peach, terracotta patterns, gray blues, and pearl ivory hues, and the shapes were not at all sharp and mechanical like usual. They were rounded and organic, like patterns on seashells or seed patterns inside of fruits and vegetables. Even though that cake started out inside the house and moved outside for the third flush, the cake definitely absorbed the energy of the garden and the fallen tree under which all the mushrooms like to grow. I saw some dancing lights, and there was definitely a very happy vibe, like a celebration was going on. I saw these tiny entities dancing like some kind of video game characters, and they were moving around dancing with the colors and tubes of light that were spinning everywhere. Then I began to see a more recognizable geometry and interlocking patterns, and I knew I was in some kind of a spaceship hangar. Instead of being the usual platinum gray everywhere, it was pearl and ivory. These same peach, tan, pearl, and ivory colors seemed to be unique to the outdoor grown mushrooms, since I've never seen that at all with the indoor ones. This was apparently my ship for the night. It was roughly teardrop shaped and was sitting inside some kind of a charging port recessed in the floor. A large canopy-like structure was over it, revealing some of its inner workings. The hatch slowly closed, and all I knew was I was looking at something extremely high performance, like some kind of alien race car. Next thing I knew, I was plugging in with the connection device that they installed on my arm on a trip long ago. And that was it. I don't remember actually traveling anywhere or zooming through other dimensions like usual. But, as I was told later, just because I didn't feel like I was traveling didn't mean that I wasn't. The scene faded and I was somewhere else. Right away there was a presence there talking. It wasn't at me, it was someone else, and they were talking really fast, excitedly about how love is what makes everything work, and without it nothing would be possible. They said, love is the first component to peace, and you can't have peace unless love is present. Only after you have peace can you have communication and understanding. He said that's the problem that our world has with its societies and its politics. You can't force communication from a state of duress or under threat. Communication can only happen if everyone brings peace to the table first, and that comes from an undercurrent of love, not manipulation or personal motives. He said everything is a fractal iteration of something bigger and something that shares the same elements. Whether it's spores or stardust, it's all iterations of the same patterns in creation, and the force that drives it all is love. I asked him who he was, and he gestured frustratedly in the same rapid tone that he was speaking. It doesn't matter who I am. Frank. Call me Frank. It's not even my name. Whatever works. I laughed because this guy was intensely absurd, but it was so excited to be telling me these things in the orange and tan patterns that were circulating everywhere. Then the scene shifted, and Frank was suddenly gone, and I saw a vast plain with thousands of Native Americans all camped on either side of a large teepee where inside a fire was glowing. I knew somehow that these were two warring tribes that were camped under the stars while their leaders met in that teepee to discuss matters. I could see through the canvas, and I saw them sitting there passing a pipe around and talking about the conflict between them. Peace is a choice, Frank said excitedly as he reappeared. You can't force it. You have to choose it freely. Then I thought about my horse, and I remembered I was hoping to connect with her on this trip and send her my love. I reached out, and I could feel how far away she was, unlike last time when she was right down the street. I felt like I was traveling a long way and searching for her, until finally I found her. It was snowing where she was that night, and this was her first time seeing snow. I told her that I loved her, and I thanked her for all the jumps that she did for me. I also thanked her for our walk in the field that day that we took together. She said, I want to run with you. And I said, I know, someday we will, someday when it's safe for both of us. That's when the organic colors and patterns intensified and twisted themselves tightly around each other as I clenched my eyelids shut and the tears just started pouring out, even though my eyes were shut as tightly as I could hold them. Then I woke up. Ami was there in the green light, but his presence was very faint. Are you here? I asked. Yes, I'm here. Why are you so quiet? It's like you're barely here. There isn't always a lot that needs to be said, Ami said. Please don't leave me, I said as the tears kept flowing out of my eyes. I won't. I tell you that every time. Even if I could leave, I wouldn't. I know. I just need to hear it, I said. You've got to stop punishing yourself. You overlook the small victories you have every day, and you wallow in the things that go wrong as if they're a failure on your part when they're not. Why does everything have to be a battle, I said. This book publishing, the cover art, the cats, the house, the horse, all of last year and the year before. A lot's happened, Ami said. I'll give you that. But you've got through it and it's over. This is a new time that you're in now, and you have to let that old energy go. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be cynical out loud. You got this. It's all you, babe, he laughed. I laughed. Right, it's all me, babe, you say right before I drown in a psychedelic vortex, puke, and then sweat all night, right? Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight, Starpilot, Ami said. Flight? What flight? I felt totally sober. No mushroom sounds in my ears, and the visuals with my eyes open were barely noticeable. I looked at the time, and it was 7:30 p.m. I was around an hour and a half in, but still didn't feel that heavy body load at all like I usually did, or like I was about to be yanked below the surface at any time. The night was so incredibly quiet. Unlike the night before with the neighbor's party, I could hear a car pull up outside and one of the kids run up the front walkway of the house next door. I could hear everything. I could hear the highway a few miles away. It seemed like my hearing was amplified to the point where even the cats snoring or drinking water seemed really loud and distracting. Then I heard what sounded like the low vibration of a drum. One beat every 8 seconds or so, and it was barely audible, even with my amplified hearing. It had to be Condor, a few doors down. I have yet to ask him whether he was drumming last night during my trip or not, but if he wasn't, somebody was. I let co-pilot out on the patio for a bit, after he was sleeping on the coffee table next to the couch with me. The moon was so bright, being only one night away from the full moon, that it threw shadows on the ground outside. I don't think I've ever tripped on a night so near a full moon. I wondered if some of that moon energy was influencing the trip in some way. I got back to the couch and under my cozy blanket, and I noticed that I was warm, but not blazing hot like a furnace like I normally am. I could walk across the room relatively easily, which was also rare for me. "This is such a weird trip," I said to Ami. "Well, you're a weird person, so," he replied. I laughed, so I'm not going to argue that one, but why is it like this? He said, "What you consider a normal trip, most other people would consider a bad trip." And I laughed at that. He said, "Remember when I told you that there are things to learn that are not as difficult as before? Tonight the lesson is about stillness and peace. You've forgotten what those things are during the time of storms. We learned about flying straight and level last year and returning to the basics of aligning yourself and your ship with the horizon. Now you have to learn to navigate a calm sea." "It's weird," I said. "I honestly don't know what to do with this. I find this lack of chaos disturbing," I said in my best Darth Vader voice. "You don't even remember how to land in calm winds. You're so used to crosswinds and storms that it's become normal. When the fight isn't there, you think something's wrong. Remember what I said this week to you?" I remembered that when I was driving, I heard the words, "Dawn is coming," in my mind. I heard it more than once last week, in fact, and when I was at a particularly low point and pretty depressed. Yes, you said dawn is coming, but when? And the dawn of what? Sorry, but I can't help but be a little skeptical after all that's happened recently. "Tonight is about being still with this new energy arriving," Ami said. "Close your eyes and just be with it." So I closed my eyes, expecting to be drawn into some geometric landscape of patterns, but I didn't go anywhere. It was just sitting there quietly, trying to not focus on every little sound and wishing the spaceship noises were there to distract me. Something was there that said, "You need to learn the stillness and choose this peace," it said. "You don't have to be anyone or anything. You just have to be. Be here in this place now. And don't think about where you were or where you're going right now. Old energy is leaving with the tide, and a new energy is arriving like a calm sea. The storms and the high seas were a challenging teacher. Honor that teacher as you leave those lessons behind and welcome this new teacher. In school, there was always a time to say goodbye to one teacher and move to the next grade. Even if that teacher was challenging and not your favorite, you still honor them and respect what they taught you. Dawn is coming," it said again. "And the night was not my enemy," I said, recalling the lesson from a previous trip. "So, what is this calm sea and dawn bringing?" I asked. "When the raging storm suddenly calms, there's only one power that can command that, and that power's on the move. Look to the horizon and watch for the light." I knew, and a lot of people agreed, that something has been in the works changing for a while now. Several years, if not a decade. So many people have been getting similar messages on trips about shifts in global consciousness and upgrades and the ending of a cycle and the beginning of another. Although I don't think it's completely here yet, it seems like it's flowing in on a tide gradually. The presence said, "The energy that is leaving is like a crashing wave on the shore that disrupts the sand and clouds the waters. Now it's retreating and leaving behind a stillness that you do not know how to appreciate or enjoy. A captain is still a captain, even in a calm sea," it said. Yes, but as they say, calm winds and seas never made good sailors or pilots, I countered. I don't even have a procedure checklist for this kind of situation, I laughed. Yes, you do. It's on page 1, tab 1 of your checklist. It's just that you forgot all about it because you were living in the emergency section for so long. I opened my eyes suddenly and spoke to Ami. When the ship isn't on fire, sinking, or being ripped apart, it feels like something's wrong, I said. Nothing's wrong with calmness and peace, and nothing is wrong with this trip, since you're wondering, Ami said. You didn't do anything wrong, and there's nothing wrong with those mushrooms. I did just eat 3.78 grams of penis envy mushrooms, I said, right? Feeling completely sober to the point where it was hard to feel Ami's presence there. I felt like I could open my computer and write or make a phone call. My phone wasn't even distorted or hyperpixelated like usual. Do not underestimate the power of this trip, Ami said in a tone that implied this could easily go down the psychedelic shithole if it wanted to. I looked at the time. It was 9:23. I was 3.5 hours in, and usually I'd be entering the most intense phase of the trip, where it was hard to hang on to the ragged edges of my sanity. And at least on the last few trips, that's where the nausea got me. It was becoming one of my reasons for hesitating on these trips. Who likes feeling like that, even briefly? And why had it never happened until just the last 2 years? I felt a mild increase in anxiety at one point as I was talking to Ami, and tried to focus on the ambient calmness and quietness in the room. It crossed my mind more than once to just lean over and gag and see if that helped a little bit, but I really didn't have to like before when it was involuntary. Don't take the easy way out if it's not even that hard, Ami said. So I just waited it out, and after a short time, felt I was okay, and I actually drank a little water. Once that was successful, I drank some more and realized the peak was over, and I was surprisingly fine. Around 10 p.m., it felt like the trip was strangely almost over, as opposed to being halfway done. I knew I was still tripping because I couldn't get comfortable on the couch no matter what I did, and I was still turning from my back to my side, searching for a comfortable position. My shirt suddenly felt like it was a twisted mess around me, so I just took it off and wrapped a blanket around me. At some point, I said to Ami, I feel like maybe I should just go to bed, but I don't want to leave you here. I hadn't gone to the bedroom for the second half of the trip in a long time, like not in the last 3 trips anyway. I usually spent the whole trip on the couch until 2 or 3 a.m. He said go on to bed, and then he'll be out here in the living room for the duration. So I brushed my teeth and looked in the mirror. I was still tripping, clearly, as I said hello to my elf self in the mirror, which still looked semi-trippy. Went to bed, and the minute I turned the light out around 10 p.m., I realized, to my amazement, I actually felt hungry. How was that possible? In 11 years of tripping, I have never been hungry until morning on any dose, even 1 gram. I laid there and tried to concentrate on the stillness and the peace. There were no visions or sounds like usual, or very mild visuals. But because I wasn't able to sleep, I knew I was technically still tripping. Finally, I got up at 12:30 because I realized my hunger was actually keeping me awake. I went out into the living room, and Ami's presence was gone from the green light, but I talked to him anyway. I microwaved the rest of the rice and quinoa that I mixed with the rest of the meal from earlier. That's when I noticed the symbol on the package that was a flower of life pattern. No way, I said aloud. Seriously? I asked the green light, even though I could feel Ami was gone. That was like a wink from the other side. I saw several white tracers and flower of life patterns in the few visuals that I had. I got back into bed feeling a little better and more likely to sleep now without gnawing hunger. That was a weird trip, I thought aloud as I laid there and closed my eyes. Why didn't I see very much on this trip? I asked the mushrooms. What do you want to see? They asked. I don't know, something amazing, something that assures me I didn't do anything that's preventing this trip from happening. So you're asking to see what we can do then? They asked. I guess it would make me feel better, I said, hoping I didn't just agree to an ass-kicking. I closed my eyes and saw the ocean, and from the light of morning in the sky there were white towers of clouds on the horizon. They were rising and falling rapidly, morphing shape, until they began to look like buildings in a heavenly city. I was drawn closer, and inside the tallest one, everything shone with that same opalescent ivory color that I'd seen earlier. It was a massive cathedral, but the ceiling was so high it reached far into the sky. And there were stained glass windows with pastel rainbow colors instead of the usual bright psychedelic colors. A deep resonating frequency shook the floor, and there was a pipe organ made of that amazing machinery that I always see that's so prevalent on these trips. And it reached all the way to the stars. And it was made of the same pastel rainbow light as the windows, and the light in that place was clearly divine. In the front of the cathedral was a massive ivory pillar-like structure engraved with strange symbols, and on either side of the pillar was every cultural and religious symbol or god known to man. There was Buddha smiling, Krishna, Durga. There were the Egyptian gods Isis, Ra, and Anubis, standing hundreds of feet tall, and every other deity imaginable or entity humans have ever worshipped. And the way they stood there was like at the end of a play when all the actors come out on stage and bow, heroes and villains alike. It was like they were all characters playing important roles in a much bigger story than we knew, and their part was one of many, like instruments in a symphony, and under this pervasive white light coming down from above. And there were heavenly creatures of some kind flying above in the sky where the walls of the cathedral disappeared into the heights, and they seemed to be made of the same stained glass as the windows. I heard a song playing, one that's always been uplifting to me, but the rumbling bass and the soaring pipe organ playing with it was enough to make the emotions flow again. When I woke up from that vision, I realized that these mushrooms were as capable as any of the others that I'd grown and eaten. The difference was in the kind of trip I needed versus what I expected. I've had a rough night on the same amount or less, and I've had similarly gentle trips on 4.5 grams, and then I've had the hardest night of my life on less. While dose is important for the traveler to know how their body reacts to different amounts, there's still the wild card of the mushrooms themselves. At the end of the day, they're the medicine, and they know what you need, despite your preparation or lack thereof. I opened up my Starry Night app on my phone to see what constellation was crossing the horizon in front of me. Once again, it was the ship, Argo, like last year, and Vela, Carina, and Pupus that make up the sails, the keel, and the bow. Also in the sky was Pyxis, the compass, ahead of the ship and pointing the way to whatever's next. That was the question I had for this trip. What next? Apparently, what's next is a new calm energy, learning about stillness and peace, learning to land in a calm wind again, and watching the horizon for a dawn that's coming. If I'd known this trip would only be 4 hours or so, tapering off for the next 2, and then it would be a night of calmness and peace, I would not have been hesitant at all to go. It's just, I'm used to a rough time, feeling crappy for a while, sometimes puking, sweating, and being wiped out the next day. It was nice to get up and not have to rip the sheets off the bed and shower the sweat out of my hair and clean up a war zone in the living room. Ami said to come back soon and not wait until I'm in such a critical state of mind to do so. If only I could know when a gentle trip like this was ahead, I wouldn't be so hesitant, and I'd actually trip more often. This year has begun with a very different vibe than last year, which began with a trip full of storms and hard lessons. I hope this trip's peaceful energy means this year will be different from past years for me and everyone. A calm tide of energy is replacing the turbulent one, and whatever this force of change is, it's on the move. Thank you for coming with me on this most unusual and unexpected journey. I'll be trying hard to integrate this in the weeks and months ahead. If you'd like to email me, I'm at starpilot33@protonmail.com, or you can reach me on Instagram at starpilot33, and I look forward to your messages and your comments about your own journeys. Until next time, travel safely, enjoy the calm seas, and I'll see you on the other side.